All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine and Pipeliner CRM, joining you from San Diego. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Anda Goseco, who is all the way over in Manila in the Philippines. How are you doing, Anda?
Good. Doing great, John.
Excellent. And Anda is a global executive and leadership coach, and she's been coaching Fortune 500 leaders for 11 plus years. And so I wanted to talk today about your leadership today. In many ways, it's more complex than ever, especially because we've been going through a pandemic and that as well. But leaders can get pulled in so many directions or feel like they have to do so many different things, and sometimes they turn into, they become very reactive as opposed to strategic and forward thinking. So when you work with your clients, and first of all, how do you help a leader recognize the fact that they may be stretching themselves too thin?
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because in the world that we live in today, you're familiar with VUCA, right? So VUCA has become really more complex. I mean, the world we live in today with the pandemic and everything. And so I think it takes a lot of self-awareness. And when you think about the word self-awareness, you may think that that's easy, but it's actually very complicated because it comes with the triggers that you have. It comes with how reactive you can be to the environment around you. So a lot of times, especially I noticed during this pandemic, most leaders were more reactive because I think we're built to be problem solvers. So we want to solve the problem right away, but without really taking a step back and really assessing what do we need to do. Is this the right outcome at the moment? And if there's emotions involved, if there is emotions involved, and if there are triggers involved as well, the decision may not be the good one. So what I do in coaching is I help people choose option A instead of option B, because sometimes you're not aware that you're choosing option B and it's actually not the best option for you, for the people you work with, and for the organization.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up self-awareness. It's a bit of a soapbox of mine, to be honest, because I do feel like self-awareness is the thing that holds many people back from fulfilling their potential. And certainly it's a lot harder to help somebody grow or change if they don't have self-awareness, or they haven't done a little work on figuring themselves out. I'm glad you said that. It sounds simple, but it's a really hard thing to do. I mean, I wish I'd been able to do it years and years ago. My journey to self-awareness was a long and painful one.
I know, it's actually, when you mention long and painful, that's really how sometimes self-awareness can be, but you have to be able to sit with it and go with the journey, because growth is all about that. When we stretch ourselves, when we sit with what's uncomfortable, and if we want to get better, sometimes it's a hard truth that we have to face, the things that we need to let go of, the things that we need to stop doing that are not effective for us anymore. And sometimes these are habits we picked up, and sometimes we call it like it's our comfort zone, but it's not really comfortable for us because it's not really doing us any good. So it really takes that humility and courage to be able to just pull back and say, like, look, this is not working. And maybe there are things that I need to just stop doing and let go. Self-awareness for me is all connected to self-mastery. So I talk about that a lot, about mastering yourself. So if you're able to master who you are, then you're able to control the environment around you. A lot of people think it's the other way around. Their environment controls us. No, it's not. That's not the case. We have the power to react, to control our reactions to the environment. And when we're able to do that, there's more control, there's more power, and we make better decisions.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good point, because and especially now, I mean, you could give yourself lots of excuses to sort of focus externally and blame the external situation, which obviously has an impact. But to your point is when you come back and you actually manage yourself and manage your reactions to things, then you can actually progress. It's funny, we follow a management theorist, Dr. Friedman Malik. He's published a lot of books on management, but he says the first in management, and it's similar with leadership, the first skill is managing yourself. It's not managing other people. It's actually managing yourself.
Yeah, very true. It's interesting you said that, because a lot of people, And that's really my expertise, helping teams. A lot of people come to me and say, like, can you help me build a high performing team? Or can you help me build a team that's more engaged, more proactive? But without realizing actually that they have to start with themselves and asking themselves that, what is your contribution to the problem? Or what is your contribution to the challenge? And really almost 100% of the time, or like maybe even 100% of the time, what happens is that they're contributing to the problem without them realizing that. And so it's like that's what I mean by it's easy to point fingers to the environment. It's easy to point fingers to it's my team's fault and this is why it's not happening. But it's also harder to take a look at how am I contributing to this? So I think for leaders, that's important. That's an important question to ask yourselves. How am I contributing to this problem? And let me just take a hard look and see there might be something I need to be doing differently. I just want to give an example. Recently, I was coaching a leader and he was saying like, yeah, I tried everything with this person and why is it not working? I tried everything. And then I challenged him. I said, have you really tried everything? What haven't you tried? And what do you think you need? What do you think you need to do differently? That's my favorite question. It's a very simple question, but when you ask yourself, what do I need to do differently? Why is it not working? What haven't I not considered? And so with that simple question alone, he was able to really take a step back and pause and start thinking, okay, maybe I should start doing some things differently. And that changed everything. And he realized his big realization there was that he was also contributing to how his team was performing. And he realized that he was the kind of leader was cutting people off. It's the way he was communicating with them. He wasn't listening to them as much. And so when he changed that way of communication, they started responding to him differently.
Yeah, it's
So
almost
that's self-awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point because that's often what the problem can be is, as a leader, you think you have communicated very clearly what the expectations or what you're trying to do or whatever, but then when you actually dig into it or work with somebody like yourself or whatever, you suddenly realize that what you're communicating isn't being received in the same way as you think it is, and that is often one of the biggest problems, and that leads to frustration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. And sometimes, or most times, when leaders try to solve the problem themselves, that they're just going round and round, and they're like asking themselves what's happening, and because of that finger pointing as well, you're not really going to the root of the problem. So it's important in problem solving, right? So it's easy, if it's a business problem, it's easier to solve because you're not connected to it. But if it's connected to the team, it's connected to you, it's just hard to see that. It's hard to look in the mirror. So I think it's just important to take that pause to become, going back to what you said earlier, to become reflective versus reactive to the situation, and just try to see what's the part that you play in it, and just be honest and with yourself to be able to find out what the real answer is or what the real problem is.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess another challenge that you probably have when you're working with leaders is the fact that you have to eventually, if you get the right people, you have to eventually let people do the job, and maybe they'll do it differently than you, maybe, and maybe that is something that's hard for you to stand back and sort of let people and judge them on the result as opposed to start to get involved in the process.
Yeah, that's a big challenge actually for everyone. I mean, not just in leadership, but if you think about it, within relationships in general, because we all grew up differently, we have different beliefs, we're exposed to different things, different experiences, and because of that, especially as a leader, if you're a strong leader, you have all this the direction you want to take. I think those are great traits. But it's also important that when you're leading others to realize that everyone is just different from one another. If you're saying that I want you to be more decisive. Let's say you're talking to someone, but what does decisive mean to you? What does decisive mean to the other person? So you think it's just a very simple term, but when I do this in a workshop and I make people define certain things, simple things, different definitions come out. So it's always good to just clarify what you mean and just also ask the person what they think they mean to be able to just be aligned. So I think there has to be more conversation around that. So especially if you're giving directions or if you're talking to your team, just to make sure that everyone really understands. Just one tip, John. One thing that's very helpful, and especially when you have a team giving directions, is to ask them, how did you understand this? Or did you have any challenges with this? Or how do you apply this to your situation, or how do you apply this to your roles in the organization as well? And so when you hear their answers, you get to really find out whether do they get you, do they get what you're trying to say. And so a lot about being a leader is about flexibility, being able to recalibrate, being able to realign. So I think it's that I mentioned VUCA earlier, and in the VUCA world we live in, it's about just really being able to just go with whatever you see, and being flexible enough to respond accurately to what's happening in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you just said there about the understanding of terms, even, because I mean, that's a very straightforward one. Decisive to me may mean I get a little bit of information and I make a decision very quickly. It may mean for you being decisive may mean I do a lot of research, and when I have the research, then I make a decision, quickly after that. But the two approaches and timeframes may be different. So I think that's an excellent point for people to take away, that words can be interpreted very differently.
Yeah, and can you imagine, John, if you you just went with that and you didn't really explain, and you said, "Can you just be decisive?" And then come evaluation time, and you say that, "Why weren't you decisive?" Or "I didn't see that. I didn't see the results." And it's because you didn't get to define it properly also. So that's what I mean also, there may be something in the way you're communicating with, and just not to take simple terms very lightly, because we're all very different from one another. And as we hear information, like now as we're talking, you may be processing things differently. And imagine if you have a team of 10, 20, a bigger group, and they're all listening to you, everyone has just thought balloons thinking of different things and are interpreting it differently. So there has to be a lot of conversation going on in organizations to make sure that there is clear alignment, especially now where there's hybrid, it's a hybrid work situation where the communication lines can be kind of blurry sometimes. So there has to be always, especially in challenging conversations or more difficult conversation, there should be a lot of talk. There should be more communication to be able to make sure that there is that alignment. And when you are able to reach that alignment, I think alignment should always be in your mind. And to see that if you both truly understand each other, and then you can move forward.
Yeah, and in many ways, I mean, especially nowadays, as you said, with the pandemic and with hybrid working and remote and virtual, I mean, it's hard to over communicate, but it's very easy to under communicate. And if you don't communicate properly and enough, people tend to fill in the gaps themselves, right? Our minds are incredible things, right? Just because I haven't heard something, I heard one thing last week and now I haven't heard anything follow up, I fill in all the gaps in my head. And normally when I fill in all the gaps in my head, I come up with something convoluted that's nothing remotely relevant. So I just underline your point about communication being really important. So when it comes to focus, is if you focus on something by default, you're unfocusing on some other things, and that's often a hard thing for people to do, is to make that choice about, okay, I'm going to focus here, but it means I'm going to have to give up on or scale back on some other things. And I just think focus is so incredibly important.
With focus for me is to be able to help you focus is to really ask you yourself, what is important for me? I think we not often do we ask ourselves that. So what is important for me at the moment, and what is and where do I want to go? So I think those two questions are very important, and to also ask yourself, like in business, like cost benefit. So if I focus on this, what is the benefit of focusing on this? Or if I focus on this, what is the cost to me if I do this? So again, it's a lot of stepping back. It's not being reactive. It's really making those right choices, and to really think about which among the choices that you have is the best choice for the moment. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of talk about being overwhelmed, because right now in the environment we live in, there's a lot of people who get overwhelmed. So it's good to be able to just just take that step back, pause first. And I think a good indicator there, Sean, is to just notice when you start feeling those things like panicking, overwhelmed, pressure, and maybe that's not the best time to make a decision. Or if you need to make a decision at that time, so pause and then do the cost benefit analysis and ask yourself, what is important for me now, and where do I want to go?
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. Great piece of advice. And the thing is, you're right. I mean, if you're feeling overwhelmed, then you probably shouldn't be making decisions. But you also need to look at, why are you overwhelmed? Are you overwhelmed because there's too much going on? Are you overwhelmed because you're distracted and there's too many things distracting you? I mean, I guess back to what you talked about earlier, it's probably a good place to start, is to say, why am I feeling overwhelmed? Is there some of this I'm creating myself?
Yeah, that's important to be able to know what you're feeling. So the way our minds work, just a little bit on that, is that first we feel it, and then but when we feel it, it's caused by something in our minds. So we have to also understand, okay, if I feel it, where do I feel it, and what is it that I'm feeling? To just name the feeling. And I find that very, very helpful personally. Let's say saying that I feel anxious, or I feel worried, or I'm angry, I'm frustrated. And then to ask yourself, the next step there is ask yourself, why do I feel frustrated? Why do I feel angry? Where is that coming from? And sometimes when you ask yourself why, there's like a surface answer. So it's also good to drill down. So why do I really feel that way? And asking yourself several whys gets you to the real root of the problem. When you find out, oh, that's what it's causing it. Okay, so now that I know that, how can I move forward? What do I need right now? So asking yourself that question, what do I need right now, or what do I need to do right now, will help you think of the right solution for yourself at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that will help you to prevent yourself getting overwhelmed if you start asking those kind of questions. And that's the final question I asked you about is, you need to talk about streamlining decision making. And I think this is one thing that I think happens a lot of, and it frustrates a lot, because people are misaligned around decision making processes, and sometimes they go on way too long, or sometimes they're too short. But streamlining the decision making process so everybody is aligned, that's obviously a critical piece.
Yeah, streamlining decision making is very important, because it's connected to what we were talking about earlier. It's connected to what we talked about earlier, because there are many decisions that we have to make. And it's about making that, choosing between option A or option B. And option A, like what's best for you. And then when we go with what's best for you, then you also look at what's best for my team, what's best for my organization. And just being more, using both sides of yourself, like using also, so the most, being able to just process your thoughts, and to think about what's best and what's the cost benefit of the choices that I make. So because if that comes all together, then it gets really confusing, and it's harder to make the best decision.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, listen, Anda, fantastic insights you've offered. All of Anda's information is going to be below this video. But before we go, please do tell people a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah. So what I do is I help leaders and teams, especially when there's a storm around them, right? The storm swirling around them, especially for leaders, to help them keep calm at the eye of the storm. So I help good leaders become great ones, because I believe that great leaders lead great teams. So I'm all for, you are good, yeah, as a leader, but you have to also be a great leader. And what does it take to be a great leader is a question. And when you are a great leader, then you can lead a great team. And I love working with people that way. And I love transforming teams and organizations, because if you're able to transform leaders and teams, the overall outcome of that is higher engagement, double-digit growth. These are some of the results that I've helped leaders with, and overall, like productivity. You're really able to hit your goals.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, thanks, Anda, and thank you for watching and listening. And I'll see you all for another interview really soon. Thank you.